How is everybody doing? Welcome to another edition of the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live, as this is my college football reaction show. I hope that you are enjoying your Sunday afternoon as we get ready for NFL kickoff in approximately an hour. We already had a game earlier today, the London game, but let's go ahead and just break down the college football weekend. Again, it does not disappoint. Incredible finishes, fantastic finishes late last night. I didn't stay up and watch all the games. I did not stay up and watch the Colorado-Kansas State game. That was way too late for me. But I did witness some fantastic finishes between Ohio State and Oregon, Ole Miss and LSU. And then the noon kickoff. What is going on with Alabama? I'm going to talk about how Alabama fans, even though it was a win, they are panicking. It's not going to be like it's been for the last 10 years. Let's kind of get real. Let's put that out on the table. Alabama is not going to be dominant like they were under Nick Saban for a decade. This is just the reality now that we live in, especially with the NIL and the transfer portal. And Alabama survives just a scary game. South Carolina, I thought that after losing to Vandy that Alabama would respond, and they just barely won. And it gets tougher because they take on the Tennessee Volunteers in Knoxville next week. All right, well, we're going to go and start with the Alabama-South Carolina game. That was the game that was the noon kickoff. And it seemed like Alabama, they were able to do what they do. Jalen Milroe with the touchdown runs. He did have some mistakes in the game. But Alabama, they were able to jump out on top, 14-0. And then South Carolina ended up making their run, able to get some touchdowns from Sellers. Sellers looked pretty good. Lenora Sellers. What can you say? South Carolina's defense got a safety, and Raheem Sanders makes it 19-14 in the third quarter. It's time to panic in Alabama. Could the Alabama Crimson Tide lose 2 games in a row to 2 unranked teams? This can't be happening to Alabama. Well, I'm here to tell you it almost did. But Alabama was able to Jalen Milroe, a touchdown run, and then they get the ball back. Jeremy Bernard, the transfer from Washington, had himself a game, 89 yards, 4 receptions, and a touchdown. Could not get the running game going. I think if Alabama wants to be a college football playoff contender, they can't just run the football with just Jalen Milroe. What happened to all those running backs that would come off the conveyor belt that would go on into the NFL, like a Trent Richardson and Eddie Lacy, a TJ Yeldon, a Josh Jacobs, a Najee Harris? Where are these running backs? Even Jahmyr Gibbs, the transfer from Georgia Tech, had an impact in his 1 year at Alabama. Alabama putting all these players in the NFL like they did 10 years ago, it's not happening. This is not the same Alabama team that we saw win 6 national championships. And I could break down each of those teams. Sometimes they had an average quarterback, and then the tail end of the dynasty, they were putting quarterbacks in the NFL because Nick Saban evolved as a head coach. He realized that it's an offensive-driven league, and I got to get the most athletic quarterback out on the field. And that's where we have a Jalen Hurts, a Tua Tagovailoa. I mean, Mac Jones, for an extent, he wasn't really an athletic quarterback. He was a very good pocket passer. And then, of course, Bryce Young. You had Bryce Young winning the Heisman. All of a sudden, look, Jalen Milroe is going to be a good quarterback, but he's been making mistakes like he did in the Texas game last year. But here's the line on Jalen Milroe, who had a touchdown and 2 interceptions. He passed for 209 yards, and he ran for 36. South Carolina's defense did a good job bottling Jalen Milroe up. But anyway, back to the crazy game, because after Alabama took the 27-19 lead, South Carolina marched all the way down the field, and Nick Harbor, a 31-yard pass from Lenora Sellers, and South Carolina is down 27-25, and they are going for 2. First of all, I did not like the 2-point conversion call. That was just a terrible play. But how about this? South Carolina recovers the onside kick. Could this happen? Could South Carolina get in position to kick the game-winning field goal? I think that was too much to ask for, because Alabama's defense started getting after Sellers, and he throws an interception. And once again, Alabama seals a game on an interception. Alabama survives. I don't know how much longer Alabama can do this. If this is the Alabama team that we see, the team that lost to Vandy, the team that barely beat South Carolina at home, get ready for an 8-4 season. I'm not kidding. Alabama could lose to Tennessee next week. They play LSU, and I'll get to LSU because LSU looked fantastic against Ole Miss. And then they play Oklahoma. All these are road games for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And, if Auburn continues to improve, it's not a foregone conclusion that Alabama is going to win the Iron Bowl, because Auburn might end up being a more improved team. How about Missouri? I think that you have Missouri and their skilled players. They could come into Tuscaloosa and get a win over Alabama. That schedule is brutal. And I know Alabama fans don't want to hear this, but this could be an 8-4 season. Now, for the fans, and they did this last week, and it really bothers me that they want to run Kalen DeBoer out of town. Are you kidding me? Look, Kalen DeBoer is not Nick Saban. Stop comparing Kalen DeBoer to Nick Saban. Kalen DeBoer is a good coach, but now you're starting to compare him with Dennis Francione, Mike DuBose, Ray Perkins. I mean, I think Kalen DeBoer is more Gene Stallings. Kalen DeBoer is going to get a national championship. He is a good coach. I mean, it's not like he stopped coaching and he didn't know how to coach. He led the Washington Huskies to the national championship last season. Kalen DeBoer is a good coach. He's just not Nick Saban. The reality is Alabama is going to consistently win 9 to 10 games every year, and they will be a college football playoff contender. The days of them running through the SEC and winning multiple national championships, 12, 13 wins. I mean, if that one year in 2010 when they had 3 losses was just unheard of, they would just run through the schedule, put players in the NFL, 3 Heisman Trophy winners that never happened in the history of Alabama until Nick Saban got there. Those days are gone. And the reality is Alabama fans need to face the facts that this is a 9-10 win team that is going to make the college football playoff. And if they get hot at the right time, Alabama could win a national championship under Kalen DeBoer. But it's a different college football now with the NIL and the transfer portal. And that's the reality. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Georgia. Auburn was on a bye. So, the 3 teams that I talk about on this podcast, Georgia, Alabama, and Auburn. Going to talk about Georgia for a little bit. There were some good things that I took away from the Georgia game, like Carson Beck passing for 400 259 yards. But the one thing that concerns me about Georgia is that defense. I mean, you let the second starter, like Michael Van Buren, who's only a second start for Mississippi State. I mean, you let him pass for 306 yards. He had 3 touchdowns. He did have that 1 interception, but Mississippi State hung around. And I didn't think that Georgia was in danger of losing this game, but you have a 34-10 lead, and you let Mississippi State back in the game and cut it to 10. You get another touchdown, and then Mississippi State makes it interesting by getting a touchdown to go down by 10. Georgia wins the game 41-31. I liked Arian Smith with a touchdown reception, 134 yards. It seems like Carson Beck is getting comfortable in this offense, and it goes back to the second half against Alabama. Carson Beck has got the confidence to just throw the football. And if you need Carson Beck to throw the football, they are going to do it. I actually did not like the fact that they didn't run the football as well as they should have, but they really didn't have to. They're going to have to run the football against Texas next week. Georgia's got to clean some stuff up because they are going to Austin to take on Quinn Ewers. You don't think Quinn Ewers can pass for 300 yards on this Georgia defense? Quinn Ewers could torch this Georgia defense. I actually see Carson Beck trying to battle with Quinn Ewers. It's going to be a shootout. It seriously is. And I think that Georgia is in trouble. I still think Georgia can win because Georgia has just enough good players as Texas. But Texas is the elite team in college football, and they've proven that they belong. And that's the team I'm going to get to. That's a good segue to get to the Red River rivalry, where Texas just completely dominated Oklahoma from start to finish. Quinn Ewers comes back from injury. He looked fantastic. This was in Dallas. They had the Texas State Fair. It was a rare 3:30 kickoff, but Quinn Ewers looked incredible. But, he only passed for 199 yards. The running back, Quintravian Wisner, he rushed for 118 yards. I don't know if Oklahoma should go back to Jackson Arnold because Michael Hawkins Jr. did not have a very good, efficient game. He passed for less than 50% of his completions. And Texas defense stepped up in a big way. And I'm wondering if this Oklahoma team is any good. After losing to Tennessee, they should have lost to Auburn, and they end up losing to Texas in the Red River rivalry. And my thoughts on, Oklahoma going forward, 7-5, 6-6 is probably the reality for Oklahoma because they are in the SEC. They got a very, very tough schedule. And then just previewing the Georgia-Texas game, it's 7:30 on ABC this Saturday night, and there's not a line in this game just yet, but the score projectors feel that Texas is going to win this game. It could be a blowout. Texas could just end up showing why they are going to still be the number one team in college football, or Georgia can make it a game, and they can end up coming out with the victory. Anything is possible in this game. I'm excited. The fact that we get 2 big games this season, Georgia playing Alabama and then now Georgia playing Texas, and we knew that the schedule, when they released this schedule and Georgia saw Texas on their schedule having to go to Austin, I knew that was going to be a challenge, and Georgia has one of the toughest schedules in all of college football. Probably the game of the night was number 2 Ohio State and number 3 Oregon. Oh boy. When I saw this game, it was just 2 heavyweights going back and forth. Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard. But Will Howard did not slide in time to give Ohio State a chance to kick a field goal, which, by the way, it was not a given that they would make that field goal. Ohio State kickers have a history of missing field goals in big-time games. Just ask Georgia fans at the stroke of midnight. All right. Ohio State, look, they should have won this game. Ohio State had their opportunities. I thought Oregon had their opportunities. Oregon said that they have never played a team like Ohio State. And I thought Oregon going into this game hasn't really played anybody. But this was just a great back and forth game. I thought Ohio State controlled the game for a little bit. Emeka Ibuka, I mean, what a talent. I mean, he's going to be a first round NFL pick. I love Jeremiah Smith. Ohio State has got weapons everywhere. But Will Howard, he has got to have better self awareness. I know that he wanted to give his kicker the best chance to kick the field goal, but when you slide right there, yes, you do have the one timeout. You're going to take precious time off the clock. The clock management by Coach Ryan Day and Ohio State was terrible, especially in that last sequence when Oregon went up by one after kicking the field goal. I liked Ohio State, just the defense, just getting at it and holding Oregon to a field goal. But I seriously thought Oregon should have went for the touchdown. If they would have went for the touchdown, it would have given Ohio State a little bit much of a tougher drive to try to get down and win the game. This game was a back and forth game, and it is really shaking up the college football playoff projection. I will actually have my latest predictions in my college football playoff ratings later on in the show. Now, if you thought that game was fun, how about the LSU Ole Miss game? Oh my, Ole Miss, they had this game won. I seriously thought that Jackson Dart looked incredible. LSU, they couldn't go 2 losses early on in the season, especially when they still have to play Alabama. LSU, like I've seen LSU football for years, and especially they're unbeatable at night in Death Valley. But LSU finds ways to win games, even if they get outplayed by the other team. They used to do this all the time with Les Miles. I thought Ole Miss was the better team. In fact, Ole Miss up 23-16. That dart by Garrett Nussmeier to Aaron Anderson with 27 seconds left to go. Wow. And then Ole Miss, I thought that Ole Miss, like, they needed to go down and try to kick a game-winning field goal. You do not want to send this to overtime. I'm kind of shocked that Coach Brian Kelly did not go for 2 in that situation. He went for 2 years ago against Alabama. Why didn't he go for 2 here? Does he not respect Ole Miss like he respected Nick Saban in Alabama? It's Lane Kiffin, still a great coach. I still think Ole Miss has everything in front of them. They are a good team. This was another matchup between 2 heavyweights. And how about Caden Davis? 57-yard field goal in overtime. But seriously, when you give LSU the football in overtime, you've got to score a touchdown there because LSU has all the momentum. And Garrett Nussmeier just made it easy for Caden Lacey with the game-winning touchdown in overtime. And LSU still undefeated in the SEC. Their only loss was to USC. And LSU could be a real player in the SEC championship. Still got a tough schedule. I mean, Texas A&M, Alabama, Oklahoma. I still think Vanderbilt might be a tough game. Yeah, because Vanderbilt beat Kentucky yesterday, and they're 4-2. What a game. What a night for college football. I seriously was very impressed with just the excitement of college football. Just last night, it was great. All right, Tennessee ends up defeating Florida 23-17 in overtime, and Tennessee did not play very well in this game. I mean, what happened to that explosive offense the first couple of weeks of the season? I thought that Nico Iamaleava looked ordinary. Florida with the 2 quarterback system of Graham Mertz and DJ Lagway. I mean, they're just running gimmicks now. They're just trying to get some wins. I don't think that this loss completely causes Billy Napier to lose his job because Florida plays one of the toughest schedules in college football. This was a game that Florida should have won, but Tennessee was able to survive against a rival, which you look at the last 20 years, this has been a one-sided rivalry. I mean, there's been a lot of emotions with Tennessee when they beat Florida. And, they beat them in Knoxville. couple years ago, and now they're back to beating them again. Still haven't beaten them in the swamp since 2003. So that's luring over them, for next year. But Tennessee's still in the top 10. They play Alabama next week. I still think Tennessee is a college football playoff contender. Let's take a look at that schedule, because I'm looking at the possible losses. So they play Alabama. That could be a loss. They play Kentucky at home. They should win that game. They should beat Mississippi State. They're probably going to lose to Georgia. They play in UTEP, and then they play Vanderbilt in Nashville. That is not an automatic win. I think that Vanderbilt proved after beating Alabama that they could beat anybody in the SEC, because I do believe in Diego Pavea. But good win by Tennessee, just they did not play their best. All right, let's go ahead and move on down the schedule. Georgia Tech, a good win in Chapel Hill on the road. They really needed this. I think that Georgia Tech is a good team. They're not an ACC title contender. They've already had losses to Syracuse and Louisville. But Georgia Tech is 5-2. And they get ready for a massive game against Notre Dame at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium next week. Notre Dame just completely dominated Stanford. And Notre Dame is going to be a team that is going to be in the college football playoff contention. But looking at the schedule, they still got to play Miami. They play Georgia. I think Georgia Tech can get to 7-8 wins, and that's really the standard for Georgia Tech football. Great win. They were able to pull it out right at the last minute. I mean, it was tied at 34-34. Jamal Haynes, a 68-yard run with 16 seconds left to go. That is how you end the game. And this was a team that they're supposed to beat, because North Carolina is not very good this year. All right. Penn State. How about Penn State coming back from 14 down in the Coliseum? A big road win by undefeated Penn State. And if you look at my college football ratings I'll have on later in the show, I believe that Penn State has put themselves in position to possibly beat Ohio State in Happy Valley, run the table, play for the Big 12 championship, possibly play Oregon in the Big 12 championship or the Big 10 championship. I think that Penn State, this was a huge win. Lincoln Riley at USC, they're 3-3. There was so much expectations for USC, and I don't think Lincoln Riley's on the hot seat just yet, but now USC is realizing this is not the Pac-12 anymore. Remember when USC would dominate in the Pac-12? They're playing in Big Ten country now. They're playing Big Ten football, which it is physical, and they're having a tough time with these Big Ten teams. And I still think USC's got a lot of talent, but this was a huge loss for USC. All right, if you stayed up late last night, which I didn't, Colorado, which, let's be honest, Colorado is going to be a primetime game just about every week. This was the game they should have won. Travis Hunter goes out with an injury. Kansas State actually was able to get the lead after Colorado took the lead. It was a back-and-forth game. This really ends Colorado's chances of winning the Big 12. I actually had them winning the Big 12 last week. I still think Colorado's going to make a bowl game. They're still 4-2. And I want to look at the schedule real quick for Colorado, because there are obviously some winnable games. 4-2. They play Arizona next week. I believe that's a win. Cincinnati, that's a win. That gets them to 6 wins. So they're going to go to a bowl game this year. Kansas has struggled. I think that's going to be a win. Oklahoma State has struggled. I think that's a win. I think the games where it's going to be tough is Texas Tech and Utah. Even though Utah's got 2 losses, they still got Cam Rising, and Utah is still one of those teams that is going to be playing hard the rest of the season, although I couldn't believe they lost to Arizona State on Friday night. All right, let's go down real quick and talk about some of the local teams around Georgia. Georgia Southern ends up getting the 1-point win over Marshall. They are now 4-2. Georgia State, they ended up losing to Old Dominion 21-14. And how about the Mercer Bears? Best start in school history. They defeat the Princeton Tigers 34-7. I think that Mercer is going to win all their FCS games. I think the one loss they're going to have is against Alabama, and Mercer is going to make the FCS playoffs, and they could win a couple of playoff games. Definitely going to be hosting a playoff game at Five Star Stadium. There is no question about that. But congratulations to the Mercer Bears. All right, that's been fun, but now this is going to be the part of the show where I make my college football playoff projections. But before that, why don't we take a break? And when we come back, it's time for the college football playoff projections right here on the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge. We'll be right back.
Introducing Gatorade Water. Alkaline and electrolyte infused for great taste. Gatorade Water, always in motion.
Welcome back here to the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, presented by Georgia Alabama Sports Live. Don't forget that you can catch an episode every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on the Georgia Alabama Sports Live Facebook page and YouTube channel. All right, let's go ahead and get into my college football playoff projection. Every week, I like to have fun, just getting clarity, trying to figure out, because there's been a lot of movement, a lot of upsets, who's going to be in the college football playoff. Will there be a 3-loss team in the college football playoff? That's a big question. If there's a really good 1-loss Big 12 team like a BYU, do they get in over a 3-loss SEC team? These are probably all questions I should probably ask Josh Pate when I email the Josh Pate College Football Show. But, that's for another time. All right, let's go ahead and break it down. There is my college football playoff projections. I got Oregon number 1. They beat Ohio State. I think that Oregon, if they do lose a game, it's going to be in the Big Ten championship. Oregon, they did what they were supposed to do. They play Purdue. They play Illinois. I think that game against Michigan is going to be tough, but I still think Oregon could win that game. Maryland, Wisconsin, and Washington. Oregon could go undefeated. And then I have them playing Penn State in the Big Ten championship, where they beat Penn State. They go undefeated. They get the number 1 overall seed. And so Oregon's 1. Texas is going to be 2 because I think that Texas is going to get a loss. And I think that Texas is going to win the SEC championship. Their loss could probably come to Georgia, but in reality, they could lose to Vanderbilt. Because they're playing in Nashville. Arkansas, that's on the road. Texas A&M. So there's a loss to be had for the Texas Longhorns. It's not a foregone conclusion that Texas is going to go undefeated. Because it's the SEC. Texas struggled with Mississippi State for a half. So Texas, I don't think they lose. Maybe they might lose to Georgia, but if they don't lose to Georgia, I think the slip up could be the following week when they have to play Vanderbilt. So Texas is number 2. Miami holding strong at number 3. I know I had them up to number 2 last week, but I think that Miami goes undefeated, wins the ACC, and they lock up that number 3 seed. Iowa State, that is my surprise team that I have win in the Big 12. I do think that Iowa State and BYU will be in the Big 12 championship. And I admit, I had Iowa State on upset alert last week because they were playing a West Virginia team on the road. And when I was scoreboard watching, I saw that West Virginia went up 7-0. But Iowa State, my narrative saying they haven't played anybody, yet they did beat Iowa on the road. UCF comes to town next week. Texas Tech, that's going to be a big game. Kansas has been very disappointing. I think the possible loss could be at Utah, but if they're able to get by Utah and they finish against Kansas State, Iowa State could be in the Big 12 championship, possibly against BYU, maybe Texas Tech. Arizona State, is looking pretty good. There's some teams in the top of the Big 12. The thing is, the bottom teams, the teams On the bottom in the Big 12, we're supposed to be the favorites. Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Utah. What is going on? I don't know. The Big 12 is crazy. Anyway, I still got Boise State as the group of 5 team because I believe that Alshon Jeanty is going to lead them to only have one loss. Their one loss was to Oregon. And so Boise State, they're ranked right now, so they're going to get that group of 5 playoff spot. And I got them playing Penn State. Penn State's going to be the runner-up in the Big 12. Look at what I did with Ohio State. I dropped them all the way down to number 9 because Ohio State, I believe, is going to have 2 losses. But they still get into the college football playoff. I think Alabama is going to have 2 losses. They still get into the college football playoff. No team is going to have 3 losses. The way that Clemson is playing, they are rolling. I see Miami beating Clemson in the ACC championship, which means Clemson is going to have 2 losses. And then Georgia could have 2 losses. We could have a bunch of 2-loss teams in the college football playoff. I think that LSU is going to have 1 loss in the SEC. They could play in the SEC championship, which means if they lose to Texas, they end up having 2 losses. I got them playing Tennessee. And so that's my college football playoff projection for the first round of games. Here's the quarterfinal projections. The Rose Bowl, Ohio State and Oregon. How about that Rose Bowl? A traditional Rose Bowl. I got Georgia and Texas for the second time, maybe the third time if it is Georgia and Texas in the SEC championship, but I don't think it is. I think it's going to be LSU and Texas in the SEC championship because I got LSU beating Alabama. Alabama's going to have 2 losses. I'm telling you. I got LSU playing Miami in the Peach Bowl, Penn State and Iowa State in the Fiesta Bowl. Let's take a look at the semifinal projection. How about this upset? I got LSU playing Cinderella, an 11 seed, like they were in the Final Four in the 80s in basketball. They're taking on Texas, a rematch of the SEC championship. Penn State and Ohio State, this time in Dallas rather than Happy Valley. And the rematches seem to always come through. How about LSU making this incredible Cinderella run as an 11 seed, but they fall short to Ohio State. Rematch of the 2008 national championship, the 2007 season where LSU won the national championship with 2 losses. I know that was a crazy year. I wish I was doing sports back then. I don't know why I wasn't. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was deployed. All right. That was a lot of fun. Wow. We've had a great show. I know. I'm just a big graphics guy. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching another edition of the Sports Beat with Richard Holdridge, as we are approximately 30 minutes from kickoff for the NFL. We got the Atlanta Falcons. They're not playing at 1, by the way. They are playing at 4:30, but we've got some fantastic games. They just finished the Jaguars-Bears in London, but we got the Ravens and the Commanders. Oh, my. That's going to be the CBS game at 1. Enjoy the football. We'll see you back here. On tomorrow's show, I'll have my NFL reaction show. I'll talk about the Major League Baseball playoffs, NBA preseason, the NHL. And don't forget, on Tuesday, I recap Week 9 in high school football on the Georgia Alabama Sports Lives Facebook page. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and enjoy the football.